Hi, my name is Lisa Christiansen, and today I'm going to present the book A Long Way from Chicago by Richard Peck. This is a Newbery Honor book, and it is the first in a series of three. The book falls under the contemporary realistic fiction category, and it's for children ages 8 to 12 years old. This book takes place in the 1930s. It follows the characters Joey and Mary Alice from 1929 to 1942. Joey is 9 years old at the beginning of the book, and Mary Alice is 7. They live in Chicago, and each summer they go down to visit their grandma in Southern Illinois for a week in August. And each chapter is what happens when they are at their grandma's house. Their grandma is not the typical grandma. And I'm going to read you what Joey says. Joey is the narrator of the story. Joey says, "In our first visits, we were still just kids, so we could hardly see her town because of Grandma. She was so big, and the town was so small. She was too old, or so we thought, old as the hills, and tough. She was tough as an old boot, or so we thought. As the years went by, Mary Alice and I grew up, and though Grandma never changed, we'd seem to see a different woman every summer." Every summer, there's different funny antics, and Grandma tells whoppers. She has a way of teaching lessons to her grandchildren and to other people in her community in a very funny way and in ways that they won't forget. One of the chapters, they go fishing, and when they wake up, they come downstairs. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to read you what Grandma's wearing. "When we got down to the kitchen, we found her in a pair of men's overalls stuffed into gum boots. She couldn't go outdoors in overalls, so she pulled a wash dress on over them, and her apron over that. Crowning it all was her gardening hat. She anchored it with a veil to keep the mosquitoes away, and tied it under her chins. She looked like a moving mountain. Mary Alice couldn't believe the overalls. 'Keeps off the chiggers,' Grandma explained. 'We're going fishing.'" So she takes her grandchildren fishing, but she doesn't take them fishing with a rod and fishing line. She takes a big hunk of stinky cheese. And they go and they borrow the sheriff's boat, so they have to be really quiet. And they end up pulling up a big orange crate that's full of catfish, and she dumps them into the boat, puts the big chunk of the stinky cheese in, and throws it back overboard. There's other things that happen that day, and they get home late in the evening, and instead of getting to go to bed, she tells the kids they're going to fry up the catfish and some potatoes. And she takes the catfish and the potatoes to a place down the road, and she has them help set up. And the kids are exhausted, and they're doing what she says, and as they sit there, the drifters, the men that are homeless and looking for jobs, come walking down the road because they have to leave the town. They can't stick around the town. It says, "As the drifters came along, being hounded out of town, Grandma gave them a good feed and a beer to wet their whistles. Mary Alice helped in an apron of Grandma's that dragged the ground. They were hollow-eyed men who couldn't believe their luck. 2 or 3 of them, then 5 or 6, then a bunch, standing around the table, eating with both hands, sharing out the beer. They didn't say much. They didn't thank her. She wasn't looking for thanks." So this book is full of funny stories, and even though I was laughing in it, it also had me crying at the end. The end is very sweet, and it's very reminds you of relationships with your own grandparents. One of the themes in this book is family, and even though our situations are different versus the 1930s, family is still important, and it's still a theme. Some of the things in this book that some of the kind of rougher topics are drunkenness, lewd behavior, gossip, foreclosure, bullying, homelessness, and lying. And that's why it's made for children that are a little bit older, but it doesn't push boundaries. The positive topics in the book are caring for the poor and the elderly, independence, self-reliance, and wisdom. I feel like this book would be a good complement to a history section of the 1930s and the Great Depression, because it gives children a glimpse of what was happening in everyday life, the language that was used, and the situations that were common for that time period. I think that when children or adults, I highly recommend this to adults too, that they will be entertained and that it will make them think about their own family relationships. I really enjoyed this book, and I invite you to also read it. Thank you.